So I would love to welcome Rene, and I'm trying. Your name is Nepomuceno? No.
Seno. Nepomuceno. Nepomuceno.
Nepomuceno.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So he's from the Philippines, and he lives in Britain now. And yesterday night we had the introductions of who is who in the room, and I was very intrigued. By you, you're not just serving as the international director of Word International Ministries. But when we were sharing about our life stories, you were talking about how you became a Christian. You became a Christian in one of the Filipino revival times, and so that affected you so strongly.
Right.
And looking at your ministry, which started in the Philippines and has moved globally and also onto our continent in Europe, I think it's very fascinating, because we often have, we go from here to there, but you actually having this passion in you. So welcome to our session. So we're going to have an interview with you.
Okay.
We've prepared some questions together, and then also there's the floor for you guys to ask your questions to him. And then later, depending on how much time we've got, we can also discuss some around our tables here. But so this is now the floor, and is open to you. So I'm going to start with the first question. As we're discussing, the churches in Europe and the migrant situation and so on, where do you see some of the unique contributions of migrant churches in Europe?
It's hard to qualify these questions, first of all, because when you talk about migrants, there are different cultures of migrants in Europe. So I would like to say this is not a definite contribution, but a contribution that is possible, that can be derived among migrants, and I will talk about more migrants. The first contribution, I would say, is in the economic side of it, which Martin earlier said that's the intention of the London mission, William Carey, to bring people to do the work here, to help the economy. And I think that's happening today. Many migrants comes to Europe to fill in the labor gaps, which many of the Europeans do not normally do, like in the service sector, like in nursing, caregiving, construction, services. So I think this is a great contribution, but again, it depends on how some Europeans sees it, especially those in the right, that they don't see the benefit of the help given by migrant. And I would say migrant churches are quite interesting, because with the gospel that they have learned, they work harder. And that's one of my observations among migrants.
The gospel they've received, they work harder.
They work harder, they are more honest. I'm not saying everyone is honest, but there is a tendency to preserve the reputation as Christians in their field of work. A second thing that I would say a good contribution, again, which most Europeans might not agree, is in the area of culture and society. Migrant churches offer a non-Western social community. It's a non-Western culture that could be very enriching as far as culture and worldview of the Europeans. Anyway, Europe wants to help the world, and instead of trying to train people and bring them immediately to the place, they can embed themselves in these migrant churches and learn how these people live.
So could you give us some examples, what you mean with that contribution there?
Yeah, like for example, I remember there was mentioned how late these people are, and it's typical about migrant churches. You say we start at 7, they come in at 9. It must be irritating, but when you go into their country, that's the way they are. That's the way it is lived. And if we want to be doing cross-cultural, you could learn it immediately here. Yeah. And also, not only in culture, but in fact, migrant people have influenced a lot of things in Europe, like, for example, food. Nowadays, you eat the Japanese food, you eat sushi, you eat pad thai. There are more Europeans who eat kebab from the Arabs. And even music. Nowadays, I could perceive that is a fusion of Arabic beat and Indian beat. In other words, it is enriching a lot of things other than other than seeing it as a nuisance, but it can enrich people, it can enrich a lot of people. And the third thing that I could say could be a great contribution is that migrant churches could be a great, it could be valuable to the government as far as implementing civic and social programs. And I think that's one thing the government should start doing, tapping the migrant churches to help them cleaning, air pollution, and all of these drives that they have. Because normally, migrant churches would be willing to do that. I experienced several of our churches in Netherlands and even in Dublin and even in UK, wherein they were asked to participate in a cleaning the garbage and everything, and the whole church was involved. You know? And I think these are things that could be of great help to Europe in itself. Not just the church, but the way of life in Europe. Yeah.
I'm, when you mentioned food, I think what stands out for me about loads of these migrant communities is actually the huge hospitality, which you haven't mentioned yet. But for me, this is like, I think, standing out across various churches, and I mean, that's part of their culture, obviously. But I mean, the sense of building family, I just think is huge in my sense. I've just been to a very big refugee camp on the Lesbos island recently, and just even these ones who have nothing have tremendous hospitality, and I felt even embarrassed to take any cup of tea or cookies from them, but they were so generous. So for me, that would be one of the contributions I also see in addition to what you've said.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. The sense of family, the sense of hospitality and giving.
Yeah, and generosity.
Generosity
even when you have hardly anything, right? So Martin was already giving us some, examples of, where the church has integrated migrants well, or it has become an international church. Now that you work across, you travel, what is your perspective on this? You have some examples for us where you think it does work well across Europe?
It's not that I don't agree, but I have difficulty in my experience of really trying to develop integration in the way that we understand migrants and the host country population would be in one room. I know it can happen, as Martin say, it does happen, but generally it's very, very difficult because culture is a homogeneous thing about a person. That's your identity, that's who you are. And if culture is dissolved, basically you lose your identity. And so, but I still believe there's a part of integration, but not in that way, but in the different aspect of Christian life, like for example, being integrated in doing charity work together. I speak for our community. We have experienced a cooperation with churches in Athens, Greece, and Operation Mobilization in working with the refugees. And it was a nice thing to see that Europeans, even from Netherlands and Athens, Greece, and the Filipino community working together, reaching out to the refugees. And because of this, they are now able to blend together with respect to the individualities of it. We also experience in London, wherein our church community work with the Methodist Church in feeding the homeless. And it is very exciting because sometimes our pastor complained, Pastor, they ask us to join them in the homeless feeding, two churches coming together, but when the actual feeding comes, it's only the Filipino church that was there. And in other words, as far as these things are concerned, there's a lot of things that can be done together. In Rotterdam, we have a relationship of reaching out to the seafarers, even in Barcelona, Spain. So there's a lot of things that can be done. And another integration, I think, that would be very, very vital, which does not require a lot of obligation for both, is in joint celebration of commemorative days, like, for example, the Lenten season, working together, having a celebration. In other words, having communion together. Not, rather than just having concert together, it would be nice to have a communion together on Christmas and during all those commemorative days. This brings a lot of sense of togetherness to each other. And of course, the most important is in the tie-up in education. Europe is known for its advance in developing programs and training programs, addressing current situations, which migrant churches do not have. And so maybe it would be nice if there would be a partnership continually on this matter, because as we know, migrant churches, I know sometimes it's subject to suspicion because the kind of Christianity would not be the same as the way it is here. But what can we do? According to the Cromwell Theological Seminary study, 3 years ago, they say there are about 45,000 denominations all over the world. If the Lord Jesus Christ is here today, I don't know how he could pray John 17, verse 21, that all of them may be one. How could that be one with 44,000 denominations? And so we expect that churches coming from, we call the church in the South, would not be able to be like the one that is in Europe. But training education is something that could put them in the middle and at least preserve the real meaning of what a biblical church is all about. Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is that from the migrant church, the way both ways can work together is a lot through social, cultural impact, right? Or activities together. But what about where you think, does it, have you seen it work well across Europe that we are not just trying to be monocultural churches, that we're not just trying to have a Filipino church in some ways? Have you seen any of these, like a Filipino church become a more multicultural church? Or you're saying that it is actually
I have seen it. Our community that I know in Netherlands, in Utrecht and in Rotterdam, it's basically half Dutch.
Okay.
But again, it depends on the constituent, because in Netherlands, most of the Filipinas are married to Dutch, and the Dutch family come together. And we have a church in Germany. It's also German-speaking already, because most of them are Germans. It's possible, but what I'm saying is to push it unnaturally would require a lot of hard work unless the ingredients are there. I believe it can happen. It can happen.
Yeah. I think what Martin was saying this morning also, that not every one of us is called into that cross-cultural element of pastoring a church. So we talk a lot about also the calling. What is your calling? What is that you are called to do as a pastor?
Yeah.
But having that global vision, no matter where we are, that we keep that global focus as such. And what I would love to hear from you, if you, as migrant churches in Europe, as far as you can see, what are your expectations to us as the more established churches across Europe? Is there anything you think this is really where we think it's itching? This is where we want, as migrant churches, we have that kind of expectancy towards us?
I think there are two words. One word that I would say is recognition. Two ways to recognize basically that the migrant churches are partners in fulfilling the Great Commission. No longer a mission field, but they are partners. Now, it's easy for us to say they are partners, but in reality, it's difficult to accept. And I would say that the European churches has the bragging right to say, we are the true church. For 2 millennials have passed, and Europe has been the cradle of Christianity.
Has been the
cradle of Christianity, you would say. So Christianity was defined, its content, its form, its color, which is white, in Europe. And now here comes new Christians, brown, yellow, red, black, who does not speak and who cannot sit in a high liturgical service. And I mean, it's fair enough to say they're not the mainstream Christianity, but I believe this should be gap. Something must be recognized that, and that goes to the second desire, is the recognition that these are God's work. The migrant churches is a work of God. It's not a work of a missionary. And God allowed it to flourish in their form, in their content, in their color. In the way they celebrate. The Africans, they shout and dance. I remember I was invited to preach in Zimbabwe. I was praying, and then I turned my back from the crowd, and when I turned back, the crowd is not there anymore because everyone is dancing around. And then I remember also preaching in an Indian Martoma group. And the way they worship, they don't even like Hillsong or whatever. They don't even like that. And they were just sitting, clapping their hands. But you could see their tears flowing down their cheek, loving God. And so this is the way God has allowed the church to grow in different. So it is important that this should be recognized as partners in the Great Commission. And they are indeed the work of God. And yes, there are some flaws in it because theologically, in those countries, we don't have the writers, the books, and the universities to study. But they need that help. They need that help as far as doctrine and theology is concerned. And another thing is, I would desire to happen is that the sharing of the blessings. You know, many of the migrant churches that comes here, except for some, comes here without nothing, just like Martin shared. When I came here, I have nothing. In England, I have nothing. And it was very frustrating that as a church, you would look for a place to worship. And so you have to find money to rent a place, which is, in UK, it's very, very expensive. And I'm sure in other European countries, they're not cheap. And there you are, there are big, the high churches, the churches that are there, having big facilities, which is most of the time empty. And it would be nice somehow that allow this, talking about migrant churches that are really working hard to accomplish the Great Commission. Share to them what the richness of the traditional churches here in Europe. That's basically our experience. And sometimes as a migrant minister, you feel so bad because even when you come in, they immediately ask, what is this, what is that, what is... They look at you with so much suspicion, and as if you are going to be one of the lesser. And I mean, I think you know what I'm saying. It's sharing the blessing and help the legal or the legitimate migrant churches who are really working hard for the gospel.
It's heartening and discomforting also for me to hear, that we cross many obstacles sometimes for you as migrant pastors and leaders. We just had a Lausanne meeting in January trying to host a gathering for next year, and so we had, we worked very hard on getting migrant pastors there. That was quite a struggle to get them on, at the table. And we helped them, sometimes we had to fundraise some of them for their travels to come. So I think that's that kind of partnership in there, helping with our resources. And so the feedback we got from them was like saying, this is the first day we feel we are heard. So it's exactly reflecting that, of recognizing them for who they are, and accepting that they are God's gift was it 2 years, which I think sometimes is hard for us as churches, who are so established for, I don't know, looking at the Lutheran context, we think we have all the rights, we're here first, and so we dictate,
Just to share you an experience, before I came to the UK, I served as a missionary pastor in the United Arab Emirates in the 1990s. And during my stay there, although it's very scary because at the time Dubai was not open to Christianity, but there were churches, the Catholic, the Anglican community, the Church of England, and the Orthodox Church. They're the only one recognized because of the political thing. And there are many churches like us. We don't have a place to stay. And we applied to an evangelical church, and they simply reject us. And simply because you believe in the Holy Spirit. Simple as that. And so thank God for the Church of England. They accepted us and help us. But you see, that's the problem. Sometimes we become so suspicious immediately of other groups. Yes, I know there are those groups also. I'm not saying that all migrant churches can be validated. I'm saying that there are some that cannot be validated, but it would be nice to have that openness in helping.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, that there's quite a big gap sometimes between the Western churches and the migrant churches. Do you see any way of closing that gap and how to encounter that, and where from your migrant perspective, where maybe you would have wished it would be
there are
our steps to take in that regard,
I suggested some gaps, and I'm telling you, I don't know how to hurdle some of them. First gap is historical. I mean, I'll say the historical right of the European churches to self-differentiate themselves from other churches, simply because it is the mainstream of kind of Christianity in history. Its form, its content, and color, that's it. And so it's natural for them to be suspicious of any kind of Christianity. In Athens, Greece, I remember, and even in Cyprus during the early days, you could even see in some doors of house doors that they say, evangelicals and other kinds of Christian not allowed. So even there, from the Orthodox to the evangelical, there is already a problem. And the Orthodox, of course, they also say that they are the Western church in the early days, or the Eastern church in the early days. So this is a big hurdle, and I really don't know how to solve it. But I think it requires a lot of determination and changing the worldview of everyone, not just the European church, but everyone. The second gap is also cultural, I would say. There's a big difference in our culture, like the timeliness, the music, and everything. And I'm sure migrant churches would not enter a Lutheran church or an Anglican church because they would say there's nothing there. Now, European Christians would not go to the migrant churches because they're so noisy, there's no order. And these are things that really becomes a stumbling block. But again, it requires a sensible recognition. And instead of trying to run away from it, enjoy it. I mean, learn it and simply accept that's the way it is with them. And it's not only the European, but even migrant churches should accept that's the way the high churches of Europe and the evangelicals do their thing. Another thing is the idea of, I don't know if I make sense with this, the idea of patron and client. Patron and client.
Can you explain that?
The boss and the client.
Yeah, the boss and the client. Again, I speak here of facilities, because migrant churches would tend to rent facilities from legitimate European churches. And sometimes they are allowed to, but one thing I could see is the relationship is not really a partnership.
On equal terms.
It's called term, but it is always, you're renting my place, you have to do this, you have to obey this, and if you don't, we will reject you. In my early days in UK, we tried to attempt an evangelical church. I don't want to mention the name. And we talked to them, and he asked me the articles of faith, and then discuss a lot of things, and then and he said, yes, yes, yes. And then later on, he talked, but do you believe in the work of the Holy Spirit? Yes, I say I do. The spirits operate. And that's the last time he talked to me. I tried to call him several times. He does not open it anymore. So again, it's a patron and client relationship, just like a landlord and a lessor.
Yeah.
And another thing is the idea of the way Western society has, I could say the secular or the postmodern idea I read this article of Grace David that was posted. Is Europe an exceptional case? It is fascinating because she mentioned there that European Christians see the church as the vicar of their Christianity, of their faith. So, in other words, she's saying that European Christians can choose not to attend the church simply because the vicar is there. Someone is there. And as long as the church is there, it represents me. And so that's the way we understand Western or European Christianity is all about. But when it comes to most migrant churches, we see the church as a family. It's a second family. And that's why maybe in the experience, some of them, all of a sudden, they look for a Nigerian church. It's not about the ethnic, it's about the family. It's my second family. That is a place where I share my problem, where everyone knows me. They talk about me, we talk about them. We gossip in the church. And for Europeans, this is strange, but among migrants, this is part of life. We talk about other people, and the pastor is the father who helped them. And that's why many migrant churches, not just because of the color, it's because they're longing for that kind of church. But in many modern churches today, you attend the service, then you go home, then nobody, it's up to you if you want to get involved. And so again, this is a cultural gap that I would say. But again, it's a part of understanding and offering the things with them. And I think the last one is the postmodernity that I believe affects also Europe and also affect the migrant. The migrant churches are faced with the dilemma of whether to be recluse or close ourselves or socialize with the European postmodern way of life. I remember when my daughter was growing up in a secondary school, she came home shocked and crying because some of her classmates asked, "We're going to a party. You have to ask your mom to give you a condom." And my daughter was shocked. Why? And she asked my wife, "Why are they asking that?" No, but again, I'm not saying. What I'm saying is that these are the things that sometimes migrant churches try to be recluse because of the way they see things, the liberal things that are happening around. Yeah.
You just mentioned various gaps here.
Yeah.
Is there any way how you encounter this as the director, of this international ministry of the various churches? Anything you advise us, or how we should encounter that from both sides?
As I was saying, I would say it would be presumptuous of me to say this is the way to do it.
Give us your.
But I think the first important thing is what I mentioned is to recognize.
Okay.
Recognize that there will always be gap. Recognize that we will not be the same. But recognize that this is God moving in this different culture. After all, even what we call the tribe of Israel, when you study the 12 tribes, they are not all the same. They have their own different accent, they have their own different way of life. except they're Israel. And the churches in the New Testament, we see that there's a lot of diversity, but they're all followers of the way. And so I think we need to understand and revive that Jerusalem Council wisdom, just simply recognizing, accepting brothers, helping. And I would say is the greatest challenge is that really call them brothers. Yeah. Because sometimes the way we say brother, but it's just a cliche. But to mean it really as a brother in the Lord, or somebody who is with us, equal as far as God is concerned, equal in doing the work of the Lord. Yeah.
And one of the last question here, which I'm going to ask you, and then it's open for us here to ask you questions and also comment on what you've heard. I had asked you before, what is your personal challenge to us? Maybe this is already what you have said, but we are here, different church ministry leaders, missionaries and others. What is that like? Your passion, your personal burden here? Maybe for us as a group, as we are multiplicators around Europe and globally, is there something you want to pass on to us?
You mean the challenge? Yeah. Well, I basically mentioned it a while. Not for me personally. I have been quite blessed to see you and been accepted by.
Did we do well?
Yeah. It's wonderful. Yeah, but this is a conference, But it's different in the natural day-to-day things.
Totally.
But again, I think there's a recognition that migrant churches or migrant ministers are God's work, and they should really be as a brother in the spirit of Philippians chapter 2, verse 1 and 5. If we have the beauty of sharing, experiencing God's love, and let us consider each other as brothers in the Lord. And then, as what I'm saying is challenge, share your resources and blessing to legitimate migrant churches. Help them and unburden them, just like the way it was in Acts chapter 4, verse 32, wherein you share the common things that you have with those in need. And last, finally, I would say, call them as Europeans. It's something to say, you keep on saying migrant. The more you call us migrant, the more we don't feel to be part of Europe.
To belong, yeah.
But we need to call them now European churches. Maybe of migrant, but the address should be giving them that legitimacy that you are a European. And that would make a big difference.
Yeah. And also in the identity then.
The identity is so important.
Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this and sharing here with us. Yeah.